Well, it's Tuesday, June the 15th.
16th?
16th, yes.
Yeah,
welcome to your perfect morning starter on Channels Television. Of course, we're up bright and early as always and ready to help you make sense of all the big stories in the last 24 hours and, of course, give you information that you can use. I am Bukola Koka.
And I'm Jeffrey Uzama Bukola. I was listening to the radio today on my way here, and people are literally, just like you always talk about, literally lamenting about the cost of, PMS. So I'm a career
story of our lives.
but especially people are also lamenting about the cost of cooking gas, which is very expensive. I think I'm going to stop by the gas station maybe a few days from now to just check how much it was. Because the last time I did check out, it was for 12.5 kg for the LPG, which we'll call the cooking gas. I bought about, if I can remember, maybe almost 18,000. I know it's 17,800 or in that region. And PMS, of course, is still high. And I'm looking at the numbers or the reports. The Brent crude is now about $82, $83 per barrel from where it was before. So people are really expecting. But remember, the Iran-US agreement is going to be signed on Friday. So the market is still watching. So I don't see the price being adjusted. But I can guarantee, almost to a very large extent, that if crude oil price comes down to a certain point, inevitably the refiners will have to drop their gantry price so that you and I can buy at the price we expect it to buy. And if it keeps going down, we expect even more. Lower price, because they're concerned, because as you said, in Nigeria, when it comes to prices, when they go up, they never come down. But on this one, because it's a commodity that is globally priced in dollars, so, and the highest component of it is crude oil. If you look at the cost element of what constitutes how it gets to you, and you buy at the price you buy, you see that crude oil is a significant, super significant in terms, maybe up on 70% of the entire cost. Then levies, fees, transportation, or premium costs, all of that put together brings it to that point. But I can understand the pains of Nigerians. It's a very challenging period. But this is what I will say, Bukola. And it is a premise on which I will engage the president, his people, and the alternative or the opposition. I did say yesterday that whenever it comes to fiscal policy or when it comes to public finance management or public accounts management, the leadership of President Bola Tinubu, who is a neoliberal capitalist in my view, has prioritized fiscal policy or fiscal sustainability and revenue generation over the cost of living. Now, no matter how they want to argue it, that is the practical data we're seeing. So if you look at the macro, is making gains in some areas as far as that priority is concerned. And when you look at the micro, there's a significant failure as to how it affects you. It's literally downside risks of the policy is that all of us are taking big hits from PMS price to gas price to electricity price to general cost of living. So it's a choice the president has made. Now Nigerians have to make a choice whether they will keep him on the job or he's doing the right thing, or they will take him out. Bukola.
Well, Jeffrey, you just narrated what appears to be the story of our lives. When I say our lives, now everyone now, but specifically the mothers in the kitchen who do the cooking. So sometimes we don't even bother checking, and this could be a symptomatic of, being average middle class, a bit comfortable, because others, as we talked about the other day on the program, have resorted to, coal, charcoal for cooking. Sometimes you don't bother checking the price anymore. When you get to the gas station, you just say, how much is it? 18,000 naira for 12.5 kg or 18,750. I thought I bought you 15,000 the last time. And that's exactly the situation at the moment. And I was reading the other day that the federal government has ordered the NMDPRA to shore up imports of LPG to bring down the cost of cooking gas. Well, there hasn't been a reactionary statement from the NMDPRA to that effect, but it tells you where we are as far as, the cost of commodities, the basics that you require for everyday living, LPG, petrol, tells you where we are as far as that is concerned. And Jeffrey, it makes me wonder, about the latest inflation figure for the month of May, which talks about inflation going up to 15.09%. Am I correct, Jeffrey?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, 15.09%. And Jeffrey, I had to go back and check what the inflation figure was in February when the Middle East conflict began. And it's interesting to see that in February, inflation figure was 15.06%. And at the time, we were purchasing petrol for somewhere between 759 naira per litre and 850 naira per litre, depending on where you are in different parts of the country. And so how come, we've had that significant increase from about 850 naira per litre to 1,280 or 1,350, depending on where you are. And inflation has only moderated with about 0.3%, because the figures do not make sense to me. Perhaps they make sense to Jeffrey, and Jeffrey will weigh in on this, I'm sure. So how come what we have seen is a very insignificant moderation in inflation figures? It really doesn't make sense. And I'm sure that the story you're telling right now, where your pocket is concerned, is an entirely different one. I'm sure you're spending more on petrol, you're spending a lot more on transportation, you're spending a lot more on LPG, as we've talked about. Perhaps that you have to buy only in every 2 months, depending on the quantum of cooking that you do at home. You're spending more on how much do you have left to spend on food, by the way? And yet macroeconomic indicators are showing positive, which the administration keeps boasting about, and our realities are at variance with these macroeconomic indicators. Well, we require explanations from the Nigeria Bureau of Statistics and Economists this morning. I'm handing this over to Jeffrey now to see if he can give me answers.
Well, I don't have all the answers. I must be very honest, but I have always had problems. You know that since the rebasing started. Now, I don't have a problem with rebasing. You have to rebase every 5 years so that you reflect current realities. So the basket was increased from 700 and something to 900 and something in terms of the items in that basket. Then there's something called Koi Cup. I don't want to go to the explanation, with 13 divisions from 12. So there was more of reapportioning of the percentage on how it affects the entire basket. And that was where my problem started from, when food was reduced from I think 50 to about 40 or so. And then there was another place they increased it astronomically. I knew that when the core component of the analytics has been adjusted that much, what will happen is that the outcome will always be what it is. I have had problem agreeing with the numbers, and the MBS, I'm sure they have known this, but they've defended their position. That is the official number we have. Looking at the US inflation numbers, year on year, it went from the last month, it was 3.8, this month is 4.2. Ours is still oscillating within those percentage as well. So they will tell you that based on their own analytics, this is where they are, and this is what they're calculating. So, Bukola, it is what we have in terms of the data. But what the numbers actually reflects is the rate of change. That is what inflation numbers actually are, the rate of change. So if it was 22%, that means 22% in terms of the rate of change. If it's 15, it has decelerated. It's still increasing, but the pace of increase. So you can now use your own reality. So what happens is that when you bring all the elements in that basket and the Koi Cup classification, one takes it up, another brings it down, and then when you look at the entire number, it affects the entire outcome. But where we also have a problem is the curve between the inflation number, which is around 15 point now, as I'm talking about it, because I'm just laughing, which is about 15 point now, and our interest rate, which is still at very, very high, 26 point something percent. That's why some economists will say that the CBN doesn't believe the numbers coming from the MBS itself, because when inflation was just going up, CBN kept pursuing it with aggressive monetary policy to bring it down, now that we have said it has come down, I think this thing has come down consecutively almost before this Iran war. It came down almost 7 or 9 times, maybe by 10%.
So you see the highlights there. Land on your thoughts, Jeffrey, but see the highlights there. 15.93, that's headline inflation. See food inflation there, which is 16.96%. But the reality is that food prices are going up. And this has been aggravated by insecurity in Nigeria's north. What, Land on your thoughts? I just wanted to draw attention to that.
Yeah, so we're literally saying the same thing. At the end of the day, it's about how they come up. So one other point where I argue with this inflation number is how the monetary policy is responding to inflation numbers. There is a way it's supposed to respond that shows me that they believe the numbers. So I may be a part of the school of thought of economists who feel that the monetary policy is also cautious about the numbers that the MBS is releasing. It's a bit technical, but this is the most simplistic way I can. So it's supposed to be like a 4 to 5% differential. So if the inflation number is 15, I expect the interest rate to be about maybe 20 or so. But again, the monetary authority, in working with the fiscal authority, there's a priority of this government to stabilize the currency. So now that we have a stable currency, fairly stable, but pretty high, the FPIs will keep coming in to help us manage our, FX accretion need. So that's why you see our, what did they call that thing? Capital importation is quite the biggest component of capital importation, like the FPI. So you see it's in the stock market, because if you invest in bonds, if you invest in equities, treasury bills, your return, especially for treasury bills, is going to be pretty good. What they call carry trading. So it's. I don't know whether I gave you an answer or I just
you didn't give me an answer. Whatever the case, nearly 500 naira increase in the pump price of petrol between February and June, reflecting in 0.3% numbers in inflation differential. Looks to me like the calculator of the NBS is broken, because it doesn't reflect what the reality of Nigerians really are. And you talked about...
Their counter-argument would be that it is not just energy that is the only component of bringing out headline inflation numbers. There are almost 1,000 items in that basket, classified into 13 divisions. So when you mop up all those numbers, some will take it up, some will bring it down. When you average it, that's what they got these numbers. But I still don't totally agree with their numbers.
We could look at all of the other service sectors which are contributors, but that would expand the conversation. There are other talking points this morning which also form part of our conversation.
No, but at least I'm not defending them. Or trust me, I'm not. Because I don't even agree with them.
I understand. I know they're just trying to bring perspective, from the position of the government, and that's part of the story. But we can also tell you this morning that the Federal High Court Abuja has ordered the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, to deregister the African Democratic Congress, ADC, and 4 other political parties over alleged failure to meet constitutional requirements for continued registration. Justice Peter Lifu made the order in a judgment on Monday, wherein he noted that the affected parties breached Section 225 of the Nigerian Constitution. The section gives INEC the power to deregister political parties that fail to win any elective position or 25% of the votes in the previous round of elections in the federal, state, and local government levels. The judgment, if immediately enforced, is bound to lead to a deluge of disqualification of candidates running for elective offices in the 2027 general elections and the upcoming off-cycle governorship elections slated for June and August this year in Ekiti and Osun State. And of course, the ADC has gone right ahead to react to this, saying that it would not stand and picking holes in the judgment. In fact, the title of the statement of the African Democratic Congress is "You're Playing with Fire." ADC warns government agents seeking party registration, and they have described Justice Peter Lifu as a threat to democracy. Now, Jeffrey, we started off, behind the cameras talking about this, and I was asking, very critical questions. I hope that, hover around this conversation. Political parties seek registration, perhaps almost every election cycle. And if they haven't gone to the polls to be tested to determine whether they have the capacity to win presidential elections or maybe even governorship elections, does it then mean that if they fail to meet this requirement of Section 225 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, then they're unable to participate or find expression in the electoral process? And so does it then, mean that this portion of the section of the Constitution excludes the, right of association, political expression of groups? Jeffrey?
It's a very delicate balance, Bukola, what you're asking me, because I'm trying to go back to, I'm trying to look at that portion of the electoral
Constitution.
Yes. So Section 225. So we're going to explore this. I'm not going to dwell on it. The lawyer, the senior advocate will be here to break it down. So deregistration of political parties, the Independent National Electoral Commission shall have the power to deregister a political party. There's a breach in the requirement, if there's a failure to win at least 25% of votes in one state of the federation in a presidential election, one local government of a state in a governorship election, failure to win at least one ward in a chairmanship election, one seat in national or state houses of assembly election, and one seat in a councillorship election. So you see there are criteria for each cycle of election, but I'll leave the senior advocate to break it down. The first question we'll ask, all of these 5 parties, did they participate in, let's begin with the presidential election? If they did participate in the presidential election, were they able to score at least 25% of the votes in at least one state of the federation? That is one question to ask.
And one more, Jeffrey.
And then that is one question to ask. And then the issue of, you can trickle it down to governorship, councillorship. So first we need to establish whether these parties actually fielded presidential candidate and how they perform, which is going to be a premise. But there's also, I think there is a stay, I saw an enrolled order of court about, I think, a stay of execution because there's a case pending in court. So I don't know why Justice Lifu will be adjudicating over a case that is pending in a court. So that is where the things that happen in the judiciary becomes very disturbing and very concerning. And then the other layer is a bit more political than legal, which is where the ADC perhaps is coming from. That the APC is doing all it can to make sure that Bola Tinubu, the president, doesn't have any competition.
Stands alone on the ballot.
And that is very dangerous. So they will use all kinds of means, legal, maybe illegal means in their view, to see how they can. Because the real opposition, the real threats, me, I don't like mincing words and deceiving myself. There are only 2 parties that can square up against APC, and they are NDC and the ADC.
But every other party, it's not a 4-horse race.
Yes, every other party, with greatest respect, they will do their best, but I don't like deceiving ourselves. So the biggest, so if this ADC and NDC, so people can say, and when there's a political argument that makes me laugh. They say, after all, there are 21 political parties in Nigeria. No, not all 21 political parties have the stature to contest the election at that level, which is why the Section 225A is there.
Has come up.
Yeah, so it's not so you can have even 50 political parties, but they can just be participants, not contenders. The only contenders, in my view, from what I have seen in this election right now, it may change tomorrow. There's APC, there's ADC, there's NDC. Every other one.
It's funny that
at the presidential level, Jeffrey, every other one, they will do their best, but I don't know.
It's funny, it just occurred to me that in 2026, how many years after the PDP lost elections, we're not even mentioning the PDP in the mix as potential political parties that stand any chance to win an election. But this particular topic, that is hinged on Section 225 of the Constitution is an interesting talking point that makes us reflect on the ideals that form our grundnorm, our Constitution. But there's one more question that I need to ask, and which is, the ADC was in existence prior to 2023, am I correct?
Yes.
So how come the plaintiffs didn't remember that, the ADC and others were in breach of this particular part of the Constitution, and they've only just, remembered months to the next general election? That's another part of the,
so we need to go and
conversation.
We need to
take a moment now,
yes,
right?
We need to go and look at the data. That's why I say I need to look at the data of how they performed in the presidential election, for instance, in the last election. First, whether they fielded candidates. ADC did field candidates. Whether they fielded candidates and whether that candidate was able to score 25% in one state. But I also brought the political convo, which is the most delicate part. That if you go through this process and knock off these guys and they can't find themselves in the ballot, we may be joking with some trouble. But I'm sorry, you mentioned PDP. PDP is not ready yet. As far as the presidential election, with greatest respect to Omishakin and the rest of them, I don't see them ready yet for this election.
I don't think Mr. Wike wants the PDP to be ready.
They are not ready.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
I challenged my friend Jugundu. I said, show me one press release that shows that you are an opposition party. Mr. Jugundu, he has not given me one.
We're still waiting.
When Turaki people act, he will release a press statement. So
we're still waiting.
It's just a joke on the side.
We'll take a moment now. When we return, of course, it'll be time to tell you how the papers are reporting the biggest stories. Stay with the Morning Brief right here on Channels Television. Welcome back. Time now to look into the papers, and joining us this morning is the commissioning editor of the Conversation Africa, Mr. Wale Fatade. Good morning, Mr. Fatade. It's good to see you.
Good morning. Good to see you too.
Yeah.
Good morning, Bukola. Good morning, Jeffrey.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed the conversation before I came on here. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Interesting. We're trying to mirror the Conversation Africa. I'm sure it's part of your talking points there as well. But let's begin with, right where we stopped, and I'm sure you would like to weigh in on it. And this is also being reported by This Nigeria. Legal bombshell hits ADC. And it's interesting that they didn't mention the other political parties, Mr. Fatade. But there's one rider, court orders INEC to deregister party for others. Atiku kicks petitions NJC. So it would seem as if really this is being, it's the ADC that is being targeted, but the other parties just fall into the mix somehow, curiously. But we would like to know your thoughts.
Well, I think it's good enough that you are bringing a senior advocate to expatiate on that matter. But for me, as just a journalist who has reported politics in Nigeria, I think there are just 2 or 3 questions for me. 1 or 2 of them you have mentioned. The first one is that there is the order by the appeal court that Justice Lifu should stay proceedings on that matter until the other issues, the pending issues before the appeal court are determined. And I think that's a higher court. So basic court reporting teaches us that in Nigeria. So if an high court is now giving an order that is overriding the order of an appeal court, maybe the National Judicial Council might want to look into Justice Lifu's judgment. That's one for me. The second one, the parties that filed the suit, in law, there's that phrase called medusum interloper. Have they been able to show sufficiently that the actions of ADC and these other parties have injured them? Do they have a local standard to institute that case? Or are they now standing as amicus curiae or whatever? Are they expanding jurisprudence or what are they doing? That's the second thing for me. Then the third thing, INEC is headed by a professor of law and a senior advocate of Nigeria too. Now I'm aware part of their zonal commissioners or whatever they call them, those ones that are above the resident electoral commissioners, some are lawyers. I'm aware some of the resident electoral commissioners are lawyers. INEC has a fully funded legal department. Where were they all these days that if those parties indeed are fouling the Constitution or are fouling the Electoral Act, why has INEC not stopped them from whatever acts of legality they have been committing? So I think this judgment is more political than legal. We are no lawyers, but it's sad. Even at this stage of our democracy, since 1999, any child born in 1999 to now, his life should have taken shape. He or she should be a father or mother if they are serious. So if this is what we'll be grappling with at this moment, I think it's so shameful. And if somebody asks me, as of today, things might change tomorrow. I'm not even sure ADC and what's the other one, NDC, can muster enough votes or enough strength to dislodge APC because of what is on the ground. And so why can't the government of the day, if indeed it has a hand in this, why can't they let APC be and let the other parties be too? It's sad, that's all.
Well, the argument continues. Let's see whether we can go to the Vanguard newspaper. I'm going to take on a lot of stories because of the time we have, so you can help us intervene. The Vanguard newspaper leads deregistration verdict. Atiku, Mark, Adeleke, Fume vowed to be on ballot. The same thing that we just talked about. But this time, you're hearing their comments now, their response. So I'd like you to comment on their response. Why court ordered
I think they should keep up the pressure. They should keep up sustained pressure. And by the way, I'm an interested party. Osun is my home state, and I was in Osun last week. And I think the fact of the matter is that Governor Adeleke is incredibly popular among the citizens. By the way, the Accord party's banners across some places I visited were torn gladly, and you could see that these were acts of vandalization. But the reality is that the citizens know who they are going to vote for. The citizens know who they want. The citizens know who are performed better for them. So I think they should keep up the pressure. That's all. This battle is more political than legal.
I'm happy you put out that footnote that you're an interested party. So let's go to the top of that nameplate.
Oh, yeah, that's in the interest of full disclosure, so that you will know that I'm bothered about it is the remittances of those of us who don't live and work in Osun State years back that sustain Osun. So we should be much more interested in what happens in Osun.
Let's go to that very top story. I tried to do a bit of the economic analytics of how inflation numbers and interest rates and FX interplay in determining the health of an economy and how the president prioritizes fiscal sustainability and revenue generation over cost of living. And he has his reasons for that. It's now for Nigerians to say whether they agree with him or not. But let's say headline inflation rate hits 15.93%, rising third consecutive month. You know, we made a lot of gains after the rebasing from about 20, I think 24, 25, I need to remember that, to about 15. And now we're losing the speed because of what is playing out in the Iran, US, and Israel war. Mr. Fatade?
Yes, please.
I would like you to speak to the issue of inflation numbers.
Well, you know, and you should know now, Jeffrey, the nice way I love to say this is that strip of all the economic indices, the one that Mr. Rewani and his fellow economists regularly expatiate on your studio and other programs. The reality is that I mean, Nigerians are suffering. That's the reality. I mean, somebody was lamenting on Sunday how it took him 160,000 naira to move from Lagos to Oyo or Ogbomoso in Oyo State. And I mean, that's serious, as in the petrol cost. And so we all know what you buy when you go to market. And people will be telling me that the stock market is making gains. Beautiful, and those things are good. But the reality is how many Nigerians are active players in the stock market beyond the pension fund or all those institutional investors? So does that percolate down? Fine, we have merged the foreign exchange window, but is the naira still trading higher? It's about 1,300 watching your scroll tape early this morning. It's about 1,390 something plus. So that was not where it was before this government came to power. So if all those economic gains are really, really there like that, the evidence that stares us at the face as citizens of this country show that things are not like that. 15,000, 20,000 when you hold it now, it can't take us anywhere. I mean, how much are they selling a wrap of amala? I think for me, and you know, we have this in economics reporting, they taught us, basket of inflation or basket of entities or whatever. How much is a loaf of bread? How much does it take to feed an average child? How much does a tin of milk cost? These are better indices for me. We have rebased. I mean, whether they can argue them, I mean, Mr. Oyedele will come out and say things are moving on the president. But the reality is that the bitter pills Nigerians have been forced to swallow is leaving stomach upset for us. And we can all see that.
Yeah. Before I leave the paper, before it comes to you, so, Mr. Fatade, you know, I did say that they prioritize fiscal sustainability and revenue generation over the other element in the micro. So that's why two things are true at the same time. On one hand, you can see the FX reserve gone up. You can see the capital importation. You can see the markets. I mean, the capital market now, the stock market.
The capital market.
Yes, the stock market has gained significantly in terms of significant percentage. But it's also true that poverty prevails. It's also true that cost of living is very high. So that is a clear decision the government has made. The gap is what has been the problem. How to fill that gap is what has been the problem, and that's why we're challenging when and how are you going to fill this gap. But let's talk about xenophobia, just where we understand the South African minister has talked about this. It's a page 27 read on the front page of the Vanguard. Our artist shows are being cancelled across Africa. Mr. Fatade.
There'll be more of that. It's not a curse. There'll be more of that. And for people of my generation and those before me, who were part of the liberation movement as far as it were, because I remember attending the University of Ibadan with South Africans on scholarship of the Nigerian government. I remember that very well, very well. And until now, a lot of people never knew that Thabo Mbeki once had a Nigerian passport or once lived there. Our government actually issued passports to South Africans, under apartheid. Nigeria led a boycott, was it the 1968 Munich Olympics, because of apartheid. And so we are not asking you that you open your borders for us, or we are not asking you that all restrain migration. But what we are saying is that the spirit of Ubuntu, the spirit of solidarity, that all the rest Africans supported South Africa, where is it? And by the way, my parents' generation were actually the ones whose salaries were deducted to support NACAP, National Commission Against Apartheid. It was a commission in the presidency, just like you have NDDC now or whatever, which was real. I'm sure people like Joe Garba, Professor Balaji Akeyemi, thank God he's here alive. People like Joe Garba will be turning in his grave, seeing what South Africa has become now. So the Mr. or Mrs. Minister of me, Madam Minister, you will see more of that. Ventilating or fulminating that Africans supported Mexico is just the beginning. A lot of folks are still rooting for South Korea, so that's the way it is. South Africa is sadly going to be isolated, and that will be worse for them.
And the interesting thing is that, when you listen to officials, they keep doubling down. I mean, South African government officials.
At certain level, it has the imprimatur of the state. The nation state is actively supporting the xenophobic attacks. That's the reality.
Yeah, and the irony of that, Mr. Fatade, is that government officials keep doubling down on that view that South Africans are not xenophobic. And, it's at variance.
The evidence points to the
contrary. Absolutely. And so, we wonder if that is symptomatic of their lack of what we say political will here to actually tackle that challenge of xenophobia.
It is an official state policy. It might not be enunciated like that in the books, but that's what it is.
But let's head to other stories. Perhaps we'll remain on the front page of the Vanguard this morning to look at other interesting stories. And I'm going to tie this with what, we have been reporting in the last 48 hours. Go atop the nameplate of the Vanguard this morning. Right there in the middle, you see terrorism. Federal government resumes mass trial of 600 Boko Haram suspects. That will be cheery to note because, was it 2 months ago, there were some outcomes from the court with the conviction of a number of terror suspects. But we also saw in the last 48 hours, the Borno state government, concluding a program of reintegration for over 700 what we call repentant Boko Haram suspects. We also saw that happen some months back in another state, northern state. This time around, it was a federal government program of Operation Safe Corridor. Does it make you wonder, from where you sit, about the number of people that we're up against in this fight against insurgency and banditry? 600 is quite a number. The last time it was over 700, and now we're prosecuting 600 suspects. Does it make you wonder what is the population size of these non-state actors in the first place? And is Nigeria and Nigerian state institutions, security agencies, positioned with, the firepower to rival and rein in on this menace, this cancerous insurgency and banditry?
Well, you've asked, like a good reporter that you are, you've asked many questions together, roll into one. Let's see whether we can strip them one after the other. Number one, first for me, kudos to our soldiers, kudos to our intelligence officers. We have seen that there is absolute lack of political will. We have seen that. But for those of them who have lost their lives, I commiserate with their families. Those of them who have paid the supreme price, we just pray that the Lord God will comfort their families. That's one side. Number two, for us at the Conversation Africa, we have published research that shows that this theory or this practice of forgiveness or reintegration is not working. Number one, we are battling an ideological battle. And you cannot reorientate somebody who is an ideologue. It's like communism or socialism or what have you. I mean, so look at Cuba today. You can't change an ideology like that. That they've been orientated, you have taught them, you are recommissioning them, and you throw them back to the society. There have been instances, and journalists like you and I have reported this, that some of those who have been arrested were those who were once trained like that, who were once set free. You know, the concept of Umwa boy, that you can go and you are now free, you can start your own trade. It's not working. That's the reality. And I think, I'm not sure, the evidence tells us at the face that does our government, actually successive governments now, have they shown sufficient will to fight terrorism? Now, look at the confusion, which at a certain level was deliberate, that trailed that general that was killed. Now, we are believing that the state government, Katsina State, issued a statement that he died of natural causes. He died of complications of diabetes and hypertension. But we've seen the children and the family coming out to say, no, our father, our husband, never had diabetes, never was hypertensive. So what happened? And there's still something that we don't know yet. Perhaps this is for those of us who are journalists to find out. How was his body released to the Katsina State government? Now, the woman that we saw yesterday, thank God for that. Was she rescued or was she released too? Remember before, the stuff that was issued was actually that the wife too was released until we saw those photos again yesterday. So where are we? And then if the government cannot level up with citizens, you are telling us you have many things to hide that you are willing to reveal. Fine, we granted that security issues might not be something that must be open, but there is basic level of decency. There's basic level of transparency, basic level of honesty. Part of the things successive governments battle in Nigeria is distrust of the people in government. And citizens that have been serially beaten, serially oppressed, serially deceived, serially cheated, they find it difficult to trust government. And those are the things that we see. I'm happy for the woman that got released. Now it's imagined that she was shot. And I wish her a quick recovery. Perhaps the condolences to her for becoming a widow that was never planned.
And you see right there on the front page, the picture of, front page of the Vanguard now, the picture of the widow rescued and hospitalized. She sustained gunshot injuries, according to reports. And at the bottom of the picture, you see there, kidnapped Kwara monarch dies in captivity after 18 million naira ransom payment. I hope that is correct. 18 or 1.8 million naira ransom payment. And you see also that's 18. And you see Mr. Fatade, either it's in the southeast or in the southwest, it appears as if traditional rulers are now being targeted. They're being murdered or being kidnapped. Now,
and part of Ekiti State too, yeah.
Now, can communities at this deepest level be accessed without some form of compromise, without informants, leaking information to these non-state actors? And how can this be tackled?
For most of us, sadly, we are sitting dogs or lame dogs waiting to be captured or waiting to be kidnapped. That's the reality. If you have followed the sad one that happened in your state very well, did you see how remote that area is? Did you see where some places they don't have even transmission bars that could help whenever there's an attack or there's possibility that could help in quick announcement or quick alert that this is about to happen in our area? Please come to our rescue. And we could see successive years of government neglect. government neglect of those areas. Now the chickens have come home to roost. These are the serious issues. Of course, we have seen again too, that must be put out, of the complicity of the citizens, of the locals in some of these areas. Perhaps possible, but the reality again is we have seen how far even the nearest police posts or police stations have formed this area. So the head or tail, Nigerians are the loser.
There must be something more behind the headlines of these stories to find out why traditional rulers are being targeted. But that's the much we can report this morning. And we must also thank you very much, Mr. Wale Fatade, for coming on the program. Mr.
A pleasure.
We have one more to go, I'm told. Jeffrey, you want to take that one?
No,
okay.
I think we're totally out of time.
All right.
Mr. Wale Fatade, always a delight to have you on the program. Always, always.
Thank you, Jeffrey. A pleasure to you. Thank you.
All right, we'll take a break, and when we come back after this break, we'll speak with the Senior Advocate of Nigeria. This issue around the deregistration order by the court, let's break it down for you. Stay with us.
Welcome back. It's still the morning brief, and we're starting our very first conversation. And of course, it's an apt time to look at developments in the last couple of hours, and of course against the backdrop of other related issues. And we're not far from politics, the 2027 general elections, as they have to do with litigations. Either it's the ADC or it's the PDP, they're mired in unresolved litigations. And so Justice Peter Alifu of the High Court in Abuja yesterday ordered INEC to deregister a number of political parties, ADC and ZLP, and Accord Party is also in the mix, and I guess one or two other political parties, against the backdrop of the Section 225A of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, 1999, as amended. What does this mean for the 2027 general elections for these political parties, and of course for the ideals of Section 225 itself? And joining us on the program this morning is Mr. Kayode Adeluola, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, who is live for us virtually. Senior Advocate, good morning, sir. Welcome to the morning brief.
Good morning. Thank you for having me again this morning.
And so we've had time to ask questions around Section 225, and so we're glad that you're here to help us make sense of it all. First of all, I'd like you to weigh in on this against the backdrop of the fact that at every election cycle, some political parties may be new kids on the block. And doesn't this portion of the Constitution exclude them? And then the ADC has been at the polls before, and I heard the National Publicity Secretary of the party saying yesterday that, this judgment falls flat in the face because, they can present one or two elected officials that have won elections in the past. So how do you weigh in on this, sir?
Thank you. First of all, let us agree that opinions will differ when situations like this arise, even amongst who practice the law. But what we need to do first and foremost, because I'm not here as a politician, is to look at what the provisions of the law are. Now, the Constitution is the supreme body of laws that we have, and it guides how we do certain things in the country, our rights as individuals, our rights as corporate entities as well. Now, Section 225, which you just referred to as 225A, says that the INEC will have the power to deregister any political party that fails to comply or to meet those standards set in 225A. Namely, that if you fail to win 25% of the votes in one state in the presidential elections, you may be deregistered. Or if you fail to win 25% of the votes cast in a local government in a governorship election, you will be deregistered. And also, if you fail to win a ward in the course of the local government elections or a seat in the as a councillor. Now, the whole idea is to avoid having political parties that are just political parties in name. A political party should be a platform for politicians to participate in elections and to win. If you recall, Professor Jega, at the time he was chairman of INEC, deregistered, well, INEC under him deregistered, I think, about 74 parties that had just been bodies that were carried along without any traction. And that left us with 18 real political parties. Now, what you shouldn't do is prevent people from registering political parties. But once they are registered, they must not only comply with their own constitution and the law, but they must ensure that they also continue to comply with the provisions of the Constitution. Therefore, if these political parties, which have now been registered, failed to show that they had won any election, then INEC has the power to deregister. And I must add that the power given to INEC to deregister does not say that it has to seek the leave of the court. As a matter of fact, INEC ought to have done its house clearing by looking at its list and seeing political parties that still had registration and that had failed to fulfill the conditions in Section 225. However, we've had the forum of the corporate trustees of the forum of former legislators coming forward to say, INEC, you ought to do your work. So that's exactly the position we have. Of course, we know that a lot of opinions will differ, a lot of people will feel aggrieved, and especially so close to the elections, it's quite a pity indeed.
Now, Section 225A provides that INEC can deregister for a number of reasons. One, failure to win at least 25% of votes cast in one state of the election of the federation in a presidential election, or one local government of the state in a governorship election. C says failure to win at least one ward in the chairmanship election, one seat in the national or state house of assembly election, or one seat in the councillorship election. Now, what if a political party fulfills C but does not fulfill B, or fulfills B but does not fulfill C? Are they disqualified based on this possibility?
No, they won't be disqualified on that in that regard, because you see, the provision of 225 is not intended to catch political parties out. It is intended to have them have alternatives. So those provisions are disjunctive. So you see, a political party may actually have its powerhouse in a local government. You cannot say that a party must win across the nation. A political party might be doing so well in a particular state or doing so in a particular local government. So you don't punish them for that. But what we're saying here is that the Constitution says you cannot be, in a manner of speaking, a briefcase political party. Like you have shelf companies. You have companies that you have incorporated and waiting for the day they become useful. Political parties are not intended to be used for that purpose.
Now, one more thing before I yield to Jeffrey. Does the Constitution, this portion of the Constitution, anticipate the possibility of defection? Because, again, I refer to the conversation on our sister political program yesterday where the National Publicity Secretary was referring to the member of the House of Representatives representing, that name fails me now, is Yagba, Honorable Leke Abejide. But Honorable Leke Abejide has now defected to the All Progressives Congress, even though he won the election on the platform of the ADC. The party claims that it still has the certificate of return of that honorable member. Can the opposition then pick holes on the claims if this were to go further? And, you know, we're reflecting on this because of the value of the ideal of this portion of the Constitution. Can the opposition then, you know, pick holes in the claim of the political party to say that he's no longer a member of your party? Does it anticipate the possibility and the damage that defection can do to the claim of you know, the defendants in this case?
Well, let us, like I said, let us look at that provision of Section 225. If the political party has had a candidate that won an election in a particular election cycle, in my opinion, I think that that serves the purpose of that section. Otherwise, it would mean that if you win an election on a particular political party's platform, and then you defect to another party, then you take that right away from that political party. I do not think that was the intent of that provision. The provision was that at the time you were participating in the election cycle, you had a candidate who won. Now, another election cycle may come, and then you're unable to win. Then, again, INEC will have a responsibility to do its house cleaning duties again to see whether this political party is just a dead wood that they carried along. But if ADC has a certificate of return to show that at the time they participated in elections, they actually won, I think it should be something for them to challenge this decision by. But then again, at the time this suit was going on, before the decision was taken, I do not know why the relevant political parties didn't apply to be joined so that they would have a say as well. Because with the parties before that court, I would imagine that we had the Attorney General, the INEC, and the Commission and what have you. But then again, I'm also aware that with Accord Party, there was an attempt to go before the Court of Appeal. They got there before the Court of Appeal and got an order staying further proceedings at the trial court. But that appeal was adjourned to October 2026, which will be very, very close to the election for 2027. Well, I don't know what the fate of that appeal would then be if this decision has been taken. But then again, I'm sure the lawyers will be able to advise them as to whether that appeal, the order of the Court of Appeal, should still subsist whilst this trial court was seized of the matter. Then again, it is for us to also look at the reaction of people and reaction of participants and politicians. The truth is, a judge has a responsibility to interpret the law and to give decisions based upon the law, not the sentiments of persons. It's a pity, but then again, I think that we are in a process of developing an electoral process and laws, and there will come a time when we shall have elections, primaries, registrations, and what have you, without this same process of having to go to the court to determine everything for us.
Let us say, we're going to come to the issue of sequencing and the timing, because the argument could also be, this is so close to election. INEC should have done this earlier, given Section 225. But another lawyer raised an important point, which you have said it in passing, because we cited the Court of Appeal enrolled order. So the question is whether a lower court can go ahead to deliver judgment in the matter that the Court of Appeal had actually stayed further proceeding. In fact, the copy I have here says an order of this honorable court, this is what was requested, staying further proceedings pending before the Federal High Court, Abuja Division, pending hearing and determination of this appeal lodged before this honorable court, delivered by Justice Peter Alifo on April the 26th, 2020, April 27, 2026. And it was actually granted because here I'm seeing, pursuant to Order 4, Rule 10 and 11 of the Court of Appeal 2021, the application filed on the 4th of May 2026 is granted, staying further proceedings in suit number pending the hearing. This appeal is adjourned to October. So there was a stay granted at the Court of Appeal pending the hearing at that Court of Appeal. But the trial court has gone ahead. How does this work in law?
Simplicity, where the Court of Appeal has granted it, the lower court should stay. That means that they should really and truly not continue with the trial. However, it would be interesting to find out what the Court of Appeal was, the basis of which the Court of Appeal made that order. What was it that Honorable Justice Lifo had decided to warrant the appeal which was lodged by a court party. Don't forget, there were other parties in that matter. We are running up to the elections coming up in January. The Court of Appeal has adjourned the matter to October for hearing. And then the determination may take maybe another month or so. Now, chicken and the egg, which would we prefer? That this matter be stayed till October, and in that case, a decision is then taken by the Court of Appeal saying that, oh yes, indeed, truth, the INEC had the authority to deregister, and then what will happen after that? So we must bear in mind that, yes, indeed, and in truth, I would say this as a legal practitioner, when the Court of Appeal gives an order for stay, it will amount to some measure of disrespect if the lower court persists in going on with the trial. But then again, as I said, it will be interesting to know what exactly a court party had taken before the Court of Appeal to warrant the order for stay. And, well, yes, then again, there's truth.
Yes, so let us say, so how does the judiciary address things like this? Because I just want to stay with the legalese. The politicians can argue about the Constitution. Because I know that one of the premise of jurisdiction and contempt of court was determined in the PDP case. The majority judgment dwelt on the issue of contempt of court, so favored the Abdurrahman's led PDP, while the dissenting judgment was saying jurisdiction should take preeminence, and that's been the debate. So if the lower courts, I don't know whether to use the word in breach, I don't know how it's used in law, if the lower court disrespect the decision of the appeal court to stay in this matter, how should the litigants in this particular case respond? Should it be obeyed? Should INEC obey this order of courts? That's one question. Second question for your determination as we begin to wind down, sir, is the persons, do they have the locus to institute this suit, the persons that instituted this suit?
Now, the question about locus is, are they interested parties? Not necessarily aggrieved. They are a forum of formal legislation. Now, they're not asking for orders for themselves as such. In a manner of speaking, it's like, when you talk about administrative law, where you say that a party may go before the court to say that this agency or department that has a responsibility to do certain things has omitted to do it. And you then say to the court, ask them to do what the law requires of them. So that's a situation where, well, can the court say, oh, this party before me do not have the locus, but staring me in the face is indeed and in truth a breach of the law or the Constitution or an omission by INEC to fulfill its responsibility? Should I, on that technical ground, simply knock it out? That's a question for determination. However, from what you have asked me, yes, indeed, what I would expect the relevant party here, our court party, to do is to rush to the Court of Appeal, file an appeal, or ask for an accelerated hearing of the earlier appeal. If that will determine what their grievance is before the Court of Appeal, before the trial court, go before the Court of Appeal and say, this is what we have experienced. We want an accelerated hearing of the appeal, which we lodged in 2025 or 2026, and we want a speedy hearing of it so that we're not caught by the decision of the lower court. That, I think, would have been my own advice to them. But having said that, again, I think political parties and politicians need to carry around with them a magnifying glass to ensure that every aspect of the law and every aspect of the Constitution is fulfilled at all times. You cannot afford to gloss over something and hope that the judge or the courts will assist you. Your primary responsibility is to ensure that you do what is right at all times. I still think that we're going to find situations like this coming up whilst the elections is ahead of us and after the elections have taken place.
So does the NDC have a moral ground to say they will be heading to the NJC to in maybe reprimand Justice Peter Lifo. If they do that, it will be the second party in recent history to have done that. I don't know whether he was listed, but I remember that I think there was it should be PDP that had actually said they want, I think they wrote to the Justice So when it comes to trial court about 3 judges. I think Justice Omotosho was listed, I think Lifo was listed, Abdul Malik was listed, I can't remember all, but I think these are the names that crossed my mind on possible reprimand because they felt that cases that go to them from the Nyesom Wiki group always favor those people. So I'm bringing that as a premise to ask whether if accepting without considering that they did not do their work, or do they have a moral right to go and approach the NJC to say, take a second look at this judge?
Well, the room is open there. The doors are open there for you to approach the NJC if you feel that a judge has not acted true to his oath of office. And you must have evidence to show that. It's not enough to say that, well, I did not like his judgment. Having said that, I think also, like Caesar's wife, only the above board, or must be seen to the above board. I think for the man who is on the Obalende bus, the question he'll ask is, are there only 3 or 4 judges at the Federal High Court in Abuja? Now, why does it seem that we have cases of this nature almost always going before such a number? I'm not the administrative judge. I'm not the chief judge. So it's not in my place to determine who hears or who determines a particular matter. But then again, as I said, we must act in such a way that anyone who is out there looking from outside does not think that anything untoward has been done. Thank you.
Well, we could expand the conversation a lot further, to find out. I wonder if you've spoken to this earlier on the timing of this all, why the plaintiffs, didn't deem it fit to present this case just after the 2023 presidential election, and what this means as lessons for, smaller political parties in our supposed multi-party system, what the lessons are for them. If you can do that in 60 seconds.
Like I said earlier, first of all, political parties and politicians need to have a magnifying glass along with the lawyers to ensure that every aspect of the law or regulations or guidelines are fulfilled at all times. You cannot hope that, well, we'll go to the courts and because of a likelihood of acrimony by voters or the electorate, the judge would dare not grant an order that we do not like against us. Then again, you talk about the timing. I think this matter was instituted in 2025, and if that's the case, then it means that those who went to ADC had ample time to retrace their steps. So you see, you find that the situation has arisen where they went to ADC, I think in September last year or thereabout, and this suit was instituted maybe just before that or just after that. Then the question is, should they have persisted in that error? You do not persist in an error when it stares you in the face. There are other political parties that probably would have been able to use, but here we are, for example, NDC is not affected, I think, because they are a newer party, they haven't gone through the cycle, and I hope that in this cycle of elections, they would win or comply with Section 225 so that they can always, have their names on the ballot. But we really and truly cannot afford to have names on the ballot of political parties that are just dead goods. Unfortunately, as I said, I do not think those who went to ADC took a good look. I think it is also possible that INEC probably just shuts its eyes and said, well, let's allow this to slide so that we don't have the accusation of trying to have a one-party state. But then again, these people saw it, brought it before the court, and the responsibility of the court is to apply law.
And we'll watch this developing story as it unfolds. We must thank you very much. Mr. Kadi Adeluola is a senior advocate of Nigeria who has brought his experience and expertise to bear on this subject. Thank you for your time on the program, sir.
Thank you very much.
Well, that's not all as far as this judgment is concerned. We'll be hearing from the ADC themselves, so stay with us. We'll be right back.
Welcome back. So just a moment, we're going to be joined by Chieftain of the ADC as we explore the issue even further as far as the conversation around deregistration of political parties is concerned. So if you're not familiar with the conversation, let me just do a quick 1 minute or less rundown or explain. Yesterday, Justice Peter Lifo of the Federal High Court had given an order saying that the parties that did not meet up to what they call the presidential threshold or the presidential election threshold, according to Section 225 of the Constitution, should be deregistered by INEC. It's a constitutional requirement. So it's a ground norm. It's not an act of parliament. It's a ground norm. So that's but the argument is to the fact that there was already a stay of action or execution of proceedings issued by the Court of Appeal for that proceedings to hold on pending maybe an interlocutory appeal filed by the Accord Party. How the legalese will play out is different kettle of fish. But let me read for you what the law says. So if my producer can hold this. Deregistration of political party, the Independent National Electoral Commission shall have the power to register a political party for, 1, breach of any of its requirements for registration. If we go to the next one, which is a controversial one, not controversial, which is the basis for this judgment, I should have said. 1, failure to win at least 25% of votes cast in one state of the federation in a presidential election. So the lawyers are saying that when an election is conducted, if you fielded a presidential candidate in the 36 states and the FCT, when we do the computation, your party should be able to have at least 25% of vote in at least one of those 36 states and the FCT, perhaps, to be able to say they can still field presidential candidates in the next election, or is a premise. Whether or not this is going to be the premise to the register party is another kettle of fish. One local government of the state in a governorship election, if we go to the next one, because I just want to read through all the conditions. Failure to win at least one ward in a chairmanship election, 1 seat in a national or state House of Assembly election, or 1 seat in a councillorship election. So these are some of the... So the argument now is, this is the argument which we try to get from the Leonard Silk. He answered the best way he can, and we're also going to talk to somebody who is also a lawyer, in fact, the former Attorney General of a state, on what this provision means. So what is the big question? Is it that all 3 conditions must be met for deregistration? What I mean by all conditions mean the condition for how you can, the victory poll, the victory tally for presidential, governorship, chairmanship, National Assembly, or councillorship. Is it that if you don't fulfill all of this 5, then you can be deregistered? Or if you fail in fulfilling just 1, you can be deregistered? That is what the lawyer, lawyers will have to look for a way to ingeniously look at this thing. So let's bring in our guest. Alex Adum is an ADC chieftain and a former Attorney General of Benue State. Mr. Adum, thank you for coming on the program. If you can hear me and help us unmute your device, Mr. Adum, we really appreciate it. Can you hear us now? Mr. Adum? Oh, dear. Apparently, because we're trying to get Mr. Adum to come into the conversation. I'm happy he's also a lawyer, so he brings his perspective. So my question again is, there are 3 sets or 5 sets of elections that were listed by the Constitution. Yeah. The presidential, the governorship, the chairmanship, National Assembly, and I think councillorship. Yeah. So is it that, my question will be, is it that if, for instance, you couldn't meet up in the presidential, but you met up in any of the others, including councillorship, you should still be an existing political party.
I did ask
so
the senior
what
advocate
was his response? I didn't pick
question. He said, it doesn't preclude, it doesn't exclude you from the process, that the requirement of this constitution is for political parties to show up and after registration comply with the constitution and not just go to sleep. And that's why, again, I asked him at the, as we close that segment, what this means for political parties, and especially for political parties that go to sleep after elections have been fought and won by the the winner decided in the polls. They must, continue engagement for visibility and for trust and, to build the democratic structure such that the people can scrutinize them, have enough time to scrutinize them, and then make up their minds whether they qualify for their votes in the next election cycle.
So is it a question, looking at that law now, I'm just processing it, because this is the same thing that happened with this 25% in the FCT, remember, whether it's conjunctive or disjunctive. Do you understand? So whether it is together or not together. So is it that the entire 5 will have to happen for a party to be deregistered? Because the lawyers may be divided on that, or 1. And remember, the 25% says, even if you win the entire country, if you don't win Abuja in the presidential election, the argument before that election was you cannot be declared president. But if the Supreme
Court,
it's
and or the Abuja matter.
Conjunctive and disjunctive. The Supreme Court said, no. It doesn't work like that. For now, we are clear. Supreme Court says you don't have to win the FCT because there's no special status of the FCT that should say, even if you win the 36 states, if you don't win FCT, you shouldn't be declared president.
And so it's an interesting part of the conversation.
Let's see.
By the way, I went to check the ADC's presidential election result in 2023. Dumebi Kachiku was a presidential candidate, and I think he scored a little above 8,000.
80,000.
8,000 votes.
Is it 80 or 80,000? You have to check.
Yes.
But let's see what we have here. Let's bring in our guest, Mr. Adam. Thank you. Are you there now? Let's be sure we can hear you and you can hear us.
Yeah, I can hear you, Joe. Good morning, Nigeria.
All right, fantastic. Before we go to all the issues, I'm looking at the results of your last election. So let's begin with your first order. The party has written to say the APC government is playing with fire. So that's a very strong word. But I'll stay with you as a lawyer and also as a party man. First, let's talk about the provision according to law. Is that the word now, conjunctive now, to say all of the five elections that are listed is the only premise to say if you cannot fulfill presidential, governorship, National Assembly, chairmanship, and councillorship, all of these conditions, then you can be deregistered. Or if you cannot fulfill, even maybe you fulfill 4 and you don't fulfill, let me not confuse myself. So if for instance, the presidential election, for instance, that if you don't fulfill it, that should be a premise, even if you got other elections right. Is that what the law says, or what's your interpretation?
No. Good morning, Chaz. Thank you very much for this opportunity to speak on this matter. Indeed, I listened very attentively to my learned senior advocate, your previous guest on set, and I was a bit amused as to why he was prevaricating as to what exactly the position of the law is. There is no ambiguity in the provisions of Section 225A of the 1999 Constitution. That particular provision amended the 2017 round of amendments, to ensure that the independent provision has the powers to register for political parties who don't perform at a certain minimum threshold. And that minimum threshold lists about 5 different criteria, starting from winning at least 25% in the presidential election, or winning a seat in the National Assembly, or in the State Assembly, or in councillorship election. So it's all in English. It's not ambiguous. All is disjunctive. So the conditions are provided under Section 225A. Disjunctive, conditions. Once you meet one, that suffices. And it is important to point out here that the powers that are vested under Section 225A are vested in INEC. They are putting our judicial powers vested in INEC to make a determination that this polity has not performed up to this certain threshold. And I said, the threshold has mentioned, but 1 to 5 of those conditions are stumpy conditions.
Oh dear. Ms. Adam, my sincere apologies. We really want to hear your take on this matter, but I don't know what's going on with your network. I hope that we can sort this out as soon as possible, because I wanted you to weigh in on whether the provision of 225A of the Constitution is either conjunctive or disjunctive in this sense. So for non-lawyers, what I'm simply asking is to say whether you have to fulfill all criteria before you can continue in an election. If you don't fulfill all of it together at in one election cycle, or however that election cycle works, that it captures all of it, you may not be able to field candidates. Or if you fulfill even one, let's even say it's councillorship election, if you feel that, you should still be on the ballot. So that's the conjunctive and disjunctive. Let's see whether we can get Mr. Adams' legal interpretation. Then we can talk about the politics therein, because I'm looking at numbers here. Mr. Adam, are you there now? Let's just try. Let's hear you out and see whether... just go ahead. Let's see whether we can work. We can hear you, but it's breaking. That's the problem.
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Okay. My point is that provisions of Section 225A are disjunctive. They are conjunctive conditions. So the requirement is for you to meet one out of the 5 conditions stipulated in Section 225A. And so once you meet one of the conditions, you are obliged to remain a registered party in Nigeria. And so the take is that no court has the powers to direct INEC to do its work. If INEC itself has said, for instance, in the case of the ADC, INEC's deposition in court was the extent that the ADC has met all the requirements, for registration as a political party. Mind you that the ADC won 2 House of Representatives seats in Kogi State in the 2023 random general elections. And we also won about 7 House of Assemblies in the same round of elections. Indeed, the former minority leader of the Benue House of Assembly, Honorable Cephas Diako, who represents Omishakin State constituency, was a member of the ADC and won that election on the platform of the ADC. So it is an irony for you to say that ADC is registered because it did not meet the constitutional requirements. So these conditions are disjunctive, they are not conjunctive.
And I believe the senior advocate did speak to that effect about it being disjunctive, not conjunctive. I wonder what you mean by saying that he was prevaricating. He did say that you didn't have to fulfill all of the items in Section 225 of the Constitution as provided. But you're saying that no court has the powers to compel INEC to do its work. But in the case of that Court of Appeal order, in the case between your party and Nafi Balagombe, the Court of Appeal did order INEC to maintain status quo ante bellum in the leadership dispute. And INEC, based on its own interpretation of what status quo ante bellum meant, complied with that court order. I'm wondering how you're weighing in on this, in relation to the prior development.
My take is that, that is the more reason why the Supreme Court has consistently held that, political matters are some of these internal political matters are non-justiciable. They're non-justiciable because the moment the courts dabble into political disputes, you are going to have conflicting judgments of the court. So ordinarily, when this matter came up before the Federal High Court, one of the preliminary objections that was raised that the court overruled, that required the court party to go on appeal, was the fact that the court lacks jurisdiction to entertain this matter, because it's a matter that is non-justiciable. And because the parties who are instituting this particular litigation against the 5 political parties are parties who don't have local standard. And they don't have local standard because they have no direct personal injury, direct personal injury, incur no direct personal injury because of the existence of the 5 political parties. And because they have no direct personal injury, they have no cause of action before the court. Because if you have no injury, there can be no remedy. Why do you provide the remedy where there is no injury? So I am saying that the court should not dabble into matters that are purely political. These are matters that are relating to the capacity of INEC. The powers that are vested in Section 225A are administrative powers, not judicial powers. These powers are vested in INEC to examine, based on the conduct of its own elections, and the elections conducted by state independent electoral commissions, which also work in conjunction with INEC. Because when you say they win even a councillorship election, INEC does not conduct councillorship elections. So they can only relate with state independent electoral commissions to determine whether a party has won even a councillorship election. So it is not for the court to determine that INEC go and deregister this particular political party because they have not met the requirements. No, it is for INEC to determine. And INEC has determined that the party that you're seeking to deregister, the ADC for instance, has met all the requirements. That is evident in the materials that are before the court. So I am wondering why Justice Lifu did not pay attention to the counter-affidavit filed by INEC, the evidence provided by INEC, the evidence provided by the political parties themselves, that they have won elections, they have met with the criteria, they have met with the conditions. For instance, one of the conditions is that you must have at least offices in 2/3 states of the Federation and the FCT. Can you say that any of these political parties that is registered today does not have political offices in Abuja and in 2/3 states of the Federation? So once they have met the criteria, it is preposterous for the court, to say, go and deregister them. Go and deregister on what basis?
Okay, so Mr. Adum, just before the ship sails on the matter of conjunctive and disjunctive, perhaps it's the, the highfalutin nature of the words that are confusing. Disjunctive meaning separate and or. Conjunctive meaning that they're together, right?
Combination of all, yes.
All those items in Section 225A of the Constitution, the requirement to win a state, the requirement to win councillorship, National Assembly. Help us understand where the ADC stands as far as those items are concerned.
Okay. Now, like I said before, the ADC won 2 House of Representative seats in the 2023 general election. Honorable Leke Abejide, that just decamped from the ADC to the APC, was a member of the ADC until 2026. The ADC won 7 House of Assembly seats across the Federation. So in terms of meeting the requirements, the ADC met those particular electoral threshold conditions stipulated in the Constitution. The ADC also has a national headquarters and has party offices in all the 36 states of the Federation, functional chapters of the ADC and party offices presence in 36 states of the Federation and the FCT. The ADC has also won some councillorship elections, which I cannot even remember now, because, mind you, the ADC was registered as far back as 2006. So in terms of meeting the requirements for existing as a political party, the ADC is on solid ground. Now, even if you say Honorable Leke Abejide has decamped from the ADC to the APC, look at how many people have also decamped into the ADC. Because it is not about when people decampment, because if decampment is going to affect the constitutional requirement, then decamping from another party should also apply. So on all fours, ADC is on solid ground with respect to Section 225A. We have not breached it. We are not operating in negation of Section 225A. So it is, I don't find it legally. There is no basis to deregister the ADC today on the basis of not meeting the requirements of Section 225A. And in any case, the Constitution should not be interpreted so narrowly. There are several other provisions in the Constitution that ensure, for instance, the freedom of association, which is enshrined under Section 40, which is a fundamental human right of any Nigerian. And then Section 14, which talks about plurality of the democratic process in Nigeria. And you have also Section 221 up to 229, which ensures that every Nigerian has a right to belong to a political party of his choice. So when you narrowly construe Section 225A in violation of Section 14, Section 40, Section 221, and up to Section 229, you are not interpreting the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. So it's a very narrow construction. So I don't see how you can say that the ADC has not met the requirements to exist as a political party.
All right, so Ms. Adam, as we're going to wind down, so if we agree that this is disjunctive, I wonder what exactly is the premise for which the judge made the decision? Because I know for a fact that at least Honorable Leke Abejide is one on the ADC platform back to back. And so I also know from the data I have available, you may correct me, ADC scored about 81,000 votes, which is less than 1% in the last election. In fact, in all of the states, he scored less than 1% in all of the states. So what do you think was presented to the judge if it is disjunctive and we have clear record to show that at least at the National Assembly there was a member at the polls before all the defections happened back and forth that won an election? What was the premise?
There is no premise. This is just politics. Even the condition of 25%, like you mentioned, the requirement is not strictly for the presidential election. The requirement is for every election in every constituency that the party participates in. So if the party participated in a councillorship election, the requirement is that the party must win up to 25%. If they don't win a seat at all, they must win up to 25% of the votes cast in that particular constituency, which is the councillorship election. You can move to a state house of assembly constituency, you can move to a federal constituency, you can move to a senatorial constituency, a gubernatorial constituency, and then the national, which is the presidential election. So the requirement is not that the party must win 25% in the presidential election. Section 225A is couched in very straight, plain language. There is no ambiguity at all. So you have asked me the same question I'm asking myself. Having not seen the CTC of that judgment, I am asking myself and I'm wondering, on what basis did Justice Lifu base his conclusion and judgment that the ADC has not met the requirements to exist as a political party? And mind you, there is a stay of execution, stay of proceedings issued by the Court of Appeal on the 22nd of May in respect of this particular matter, directing the lower court to stay all action pending the determination of the appeal before the Court of Appeal.
All right. Which
appeal is to be heard on the 27th of October. So if there is a pending stay of proceedings issued by an appellate court, can a lower court still proceed to go to judgment? I have never heard in all my 27 years of practice, I have never seen this kind of thing before.
All right.
If this is not pure politics, I'm going back to June 12 type of Justice Payment kind of midnight judgment. I don't see what this represents.
Ms. Adam, the good thing about jurisprudence is the fact that there's a sequence. So there's a trial court, there's the appellate court, there's the Supreme Court. And in fact, some people will argue to the effect that the trial court is even allowed to make mistakes that can be corrected in the higher court. So let's see how INEC and your party...
Make an obvious mistake when you don't make an obvious mistake in the face of a directive from a superior court that you should not proceed. This is contempt of court.
Well, I leave that to you lawyers and politicians. My job is to mainstream the conversation and let's make sense out of it. And we all learn from the situation. But I must thank you, Mr. Adam. Alex Adam is an ADC chieftain and a former Attorney General of Benue State. Thank you, sir. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Now we'll take a break, and when we come back after this break, we'll leave the Nigerian conversation for a bit. One of ours is making us proud in Faro, United States, in the state of California. We're going to have a conversation with him because of what he oversees in that state. And let's do some peer review and what we can learn from each other. That will be in a moment. Stay with us. Welcome back. I did talk about Nigerians making us proud across the world, and one of them is right here in our studios. And let's bring him in on the program. Mr. Toks Omishakin is the Secretary of Transportation in the state of California, United States. Yeah. Toks, is that okay to call you that?
Of course. Yeah. Good morning.
Good morning and welcome to, well, I say welcome to Nigeria because you've been here over and over and over again.
I have, quite a few times.
You know, so people, so when we see Nigeria, for the records, I'm sure you know we like to claim our own. Wherever we hear our names, for instance, now the World Cup is ongoing, including the United States, where I think they are playing in LA stadiums and
That's right.
St. Clara also. Yeah. There are two stadiums. So we have our very own Balogun playing for the United States. We have about 16 Nigerians across different Nigerian heritage playing across different nationalities, including the United States. And we're making, well, Nigeria is well represented. But welcome. Talk to us about the experience has been being a Nigerian and occupying where you're occupying as a Secretary of Transportation in the state of California. Let's just get to know you first, and then we can explore the conversation deeper.
Sure. But by the way, I love how you started off the conversation with so many Nigerians representing so well across the globe, because very often, sometimes what you hear about Nigerians are, you know, the shortcomings, the stories of where we possibly fell short in one way or the other. So to hear about the successes is just something that's pretty heartwarming. I saw Balogun, and my son's a big soccer player back in the U.S., and he was very proud of the fact that he had two goals in a match, the first U.S. match. So very proud of our accomplishments around the world. So for me, it's been an incredible journey. God's blessed me with tremendous opportunity in serving in government in the United States. I've been working in government for almost 25 years now in the U.S. I currently serve, as you mentioned, as the Secretary of Transportation for the state of California. I was appointed by Governor Gavin Newsom to this role in February of 2022. Prior to that, in September of 2019, I served as the Director of Transportation, which is a different role than Secretary of Transportation. In this job, it's the most, it's the most vast responsibility in transportation other than the Secretary of Transportation for the U.S. government. So other than that post, this is the next largest post in transport in the U.S. It has roughly 45,000 people and staff, a budget of about $35 billion, oversees more than 50,000 miles of highways that we're responsible for maintaining, operating, and building. But we also have to partner and lead several other transportation organizations in the state. We have 12 seaports, more than 250 airports, more than 300 transit agencies in the state. So it's a huge responsibility for a state of 40 million people. And we now have a GDP of roughly 4.3 trillion.
That's bigger than that of Africa, by the way.
That's correct. Africa's GDP is roughly 3 trillion.
3 trillion, yeah.
Roughly. And the state of, almost said the continent of Africa. I almost said the continent of California. The state of California's GDP is larger than the continent of Africa, and it is approximately roughly the same size as the GDP of South America. So we're not just competing with states or countries, we're the size of continents as far as our GDP goes. Just impressive what the state's been able to do, especially over the last 20 years in economic growth.
For context, yes. California is the third largest city in the United States?
The largest state in the United States.
Third largest state in the United States.
Oh, the largest state.
The largest.
Yeah, the largest state, yes.
Wow. And that's over 353,000 square kilometers.
Correct.
Nearly half of Nigeria.
Yes.
And you did mention the $30 billion budget for the California State of Transportation.
Yes.
That's like, a budget nearly the size of Nigeria's annual budget.
Annual budget.
So in a sense, you're like a minister of transportation in Nigeria. What does it feel like overseeing, that size of, a ministry? You did mention 42,000 people.
Yeah.
What does it feel like? And what's the weight of your responsibility?
It's significant. There are days and nights, especially when challenges occur, where it can be daunting and sleepless. You have some sleepless nights. some of the toughest moments are when disasters happen, disasters strike. California's a coastal state, so occasionally, sometimes we have major fires that shut down the freeway system or major crashes. We've had floods that impact the transportation system of the state. There was one particular fire that burned down one of the busiest freeways in the state, one of the busiest freeways actually in the entire United States. That the governor and myself and our staff had to be on the ground for several days. So really challenging days. But we also know, our team, that 40,000 plus people, there's a clear recognition that we are the backbone of the economy of the state. And if I were to recommend that if I were to be having a conversation with the minister, by the way, I've had a chance to talk to the Minister of Transportation for this country on a couple of occasions. If I were to say anything to them, I'll try to tell them to keep that in mind. Like a country, a state, a city doesn't reach its heights that it wants to reach without a robust transportation system. That $4.3 trillion economy that I mentioned, it's because of our transport system. Those ports that I mentioned, for example, those seaports, 2 of the busiest seaports in the entire United States are in Los Angeles. And those seaports, 40% of every good that enters America on a container, 40% of them, they come through those ports. And so not only do those ports have to be functional, the rail system that's connected to it and the highway system that's connected to it has to be top-notch as well. So all those supply chains, those networks, have to work well together. We have airports in Los Angeles and San Francisco, rank in the top 10 of the busiest airports in the entire United States. Freeway systems that are very busy, transit systems. We have what we call the Capital Corridor in the San Francisco Bay Area. That inner city rail corridor is the second busiest rail system in the entire country as well. So there's so much that's happening from a transport sector that if it wasn't as strong as it was, not that we don't have problems and issues, but if it wasn't as strong as it was, there's no way in the world California becomes this robust global powerhouse that it's become.
We're going to talk about what we can learn from each other.
Sure.
But before we leave California, I was looking through the details of what has happened with the high-speed. It hasn't tracked. I know there's a variation to the budget. I know, in fact, last year I read that Donald Trump had actually pulled the plug on it because he didn't want to fund it. Yeah. It was initially $33 billion. Now it's gone as far as maybe between 80 to 120 billion. So what has happened with the high speed? We don't have high speed here, by the way, but we have a blue line, blue and red line here in Lagos here. I think we're working on a green line. So mobility must be mobility.
And Jeffrey, don't forget to add that we have regular challenges with rail derailments.
Yeah. So, but I wanted to find out what's going on with that high speed, bullet speed train that has not tracked.
I have to commend you, Jeffrey, for doing your homework. All those numbers were spot on what you just said. Look, when you're doing something that's never been done before, you're going to run into hurdles. You're going to run into challenges. And this high-speed rail project that we're building in California is the first one in the Western Hemisphere. So nobody has ever done it. It exists in Asia, it exists in Europe, but nowhere else in North America has anything remotely close to this. And what we're trying to build is a 500-mile system that will connect the 2 biggest economic regions of the state. The Bay Area, that's known for all the technology in Silicon Valley, all the way down to Los Angeles, the entertainment capital probably of the world, and traversing what we call the Central Valley, the biggest agricultural hub.
So it's more inland.
Yes, it's inland.
Okay.
And so when the voters of the state of California had to pass a measure, they had to go to the ballot box and vote to say they want this high-speed rail to happen. They voted for it in 2008. The promise was that this rail system will be open and people riding this high-speed train, 200 miles an hour plus is the goal. They'll be riding it by 2020 from 2008. And we still have yet to be able to get to the place where we have an operational train system. We've run into multiple hurdles. Everything from a very rigid, a very stringent environmental process that we have to go through, unlike in some places like in Asia, for example, in China, or probably here, you can just clear land and say, we're going to build. You don't do that there. It's a very litigious, very rigorous process you have to go through when you're building an infrastructure project. And when you're talking 500 miles, that's a lot of pieces of property along the way, including very sensitive environmental areas. So the cost has gone up from $33 billion in 2008 to a more realistic true cost of about 126 to 130 billion today. But what I'll tell you is that despite those challenges, our administration, the Governor Gavin Newsom administration, we've done more to advance that project than ever before, than anybody prior, I would say. The environmental document is now 98% completed. The property acquisition, we call right-of-way acquisition, that needs to be had, that needs to be gathered, same thing, about 99% complete. The amount of jobs created, extensive. 19,000 jobs have been created because of the project. The project needs 92 viaducts and bridges, these massive bridges that's going to go over the freeway.
So sorry, because of time, so how soon should we expect it to come on stream so that Bukola can train on questions?
Sure, 2033. 2033 is what we're expecting now.
All right,
to have it up and running.
Before we leave that particular subject, what can we learn, from the California experience and its construction of this high-speed rail? And I ask against the backdrop of Nigeria's construction of the Abuja-Kaduna rail, which took about 7 years and cost at that time, not now, $1.46 billion.
Yeah, the biggest thing that I'll say, that's the biggest lesson that I think we've learned from this, beyond the things like environmental process and property acquisition, all those things, is the commitment has to be genuine from the federal government and all the other state and local governments that are participating in the project. That commitment hasn't been there in this project in the history of the project. Jeffrey mentioned the fact that the current president has taken money away from the project. He took away $4 billion. He took $1 billion away in his prior administration. In his current tenure, he's taken away $3 billion. All those uncertainties created by the lack of consistent funding delays, being able to get a major project done. So, to me, if I were to be advising the president of this country or any governor, the number one thing that I would focus on in being able to revive an economy and focus on an economy would be infrastructure. It would be public infrastructure, highways, bridges, rail, water systems, power. That's what revives economies around the world. China did it. Nigeria can continue to do that here as well. But that commitment, the funding, saying, don't care what else is going on. We know there are other priorities, but we're going to make sure that the dollars or the naira is there to deliver this project and hire people to do it locally. That's one of the most important things that can be done for the country.
That's quite instructive, especially because, some of this funding were borrowed funds from China, and we could go on and on of that. But we can't finish this conversation without me asking this bit. You're born in Knoxville to Nigerian immigrants, and that means you're a second-generation Nigerian in America, African-American. Talk to us about your career trajectory and how you have risen to, this prestigious post. Is it easier for a second-generation immigrant to be reintegrated into American society?
Wow, that's a complicated question. Look, it's been for me a lot of faith in family. My parents, Dr. Ademola and Moshun Omishakin, they sacrificed a lot for 4 kids. We were born in the U.S. but raised here. I came to Nigeria when I was 4 years old. I lived here till I was about 14. I went to high school in Ibadan, to a government college in Ibadan, and then they moved us back to the U.S. And I had to try to assimilate. I had a Nigerian accent, Nigerian-British accent, and grown up in the southern part of the United States where, they're not used to a lot of foreign, people, the places where I lived, in Tennessee and Mississippi. It's not like New York or L.A. And, I would walk in a room and I would say something and people would start laughing like, where they get the African boy from? So I went through a lot, trying to adjust to the culture, but my parents stressed education, just like most Nigerian parents around the world and here, stressed education. And that's been the thing for me is I focused on that very intently all the way to, they said you have to get a doctorate degree, typical Nigerian parents, all the way to getting a doctorate degree. And my career is just, I couldn't have predicted it. To be in charge and responsible for one of the largest government organizations in the U.S., I never would have said something like that would have happened. Living in Ibadan, not too far away from here, going to government college.
Right.
There's going to be no way I'd be able to predict something like that. But a lot of amazing people have supported me beyond family. And again, the success I have today is because of a tremendous team that's around me as well.
We wish we can stay with you for as long as possible. I wanted a three-way advisory for Lagos, Nigeria, and Africa in transportation, but my director is on my ears. But thanks for coming through. I know you're going to turn 50 next.
You're not supposed to be telling people that.
So happy birthday in arrears, by the way. And now you talked about growing up in white neighborhood. At least California is a lot better. At least more Hispanic and second black.
More diverse.
Yeah, more diverse than this. So thank you so much for making Nigeria proud. One last thought from you?
Yes, by the way.
10 seconds?
Yeah, I'm here for AfroTrade. Check out AfroTrade 2026. President Obasanjo is going to be a part of the event as well. I'm looking forward to participating in AfroTrade here at Eco Hotel tomorrow.
Oh, fantastic. So you're going to be speaking?
I'll be speaking, yes, along with former President Obasanjo and Abike Dabiri,
Newcomb boss.
Yes.
I can give you 30 more seconds. What is it all about?
It's about how the African economy can be revived through trade, through business development. Is essentially the focus of this. Infrastructure is also a big part of the discussion. They're expecting more than 3,000 people to attend this event.
Fantastic thought. Because we need those barriers to be broken. That's why I wanted that three-way advisory, because transportation and commuting and even moving around Africa is limited by all of the visa encumbrances that we feel. But almost thank you.
Thanks for having me on. Thank you so much.
Adetukumbo Omishakin, known as Toks, Secretary of Transportation from the state of California, United States. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
And that's it on the program. Thank you so much for your time and company. I hope you've learned a thing or two. The conversation continues later part of the day in all our programs. Sunrise Daily is up next. I'm Jeffrey Zona. Bye-bye.
And speaking of learning, wherever you are from, your dreams are valid. I guess this last segment tells you that. We'll be back again tomorrow. I am Bukola Koka. Bye for now.